Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hey, Pete. We're back. Films and Stuff podcast. How are you today?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
Everything is great. It is time for our weekly stream or skip segment. You know the rules, but I'll recap them quickly for our listeners. I pick a show for Pete. He watches 2 to 3 episodes and gives it a rating. Pete chooses a series for me. I watch it, a few episodes, and I give my feedback as well. And the goal of this is to identify diamonds in the rough, hidden gems, or shows that absolutely should not be watched. So this is public service to help our listeners decide what they should stream and what they should skip.
That's right. To that effect, I had to watch Dopesick.
Dopesick.
Yeah. So Dopesick is on Hulu. And it is effectively, think of this as, we've seen biopics in the past, right? Which focus the life story of one individual person. Think of this as a biopic, but not for an individual person, but for a specific event or a phenomenon, which we've seen in the past. Aaron Brockovich was a little bit of both. It was about Aaron Brockovich, but it was also about the scandal that made her famous, right? Or the legal case. We saw this with Spotlight with Mark Ruffalo and also Michael Keaton, which was about the child abuse scandal in Boston.
So it's kind of like WeWork or something like this, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. In that regard, this is a mini series, so 1 season and that's it. 8 episodes, and it's about Purdue Pharmaceuticals and OxyContin.
Oh.
And then, of course, the opioid epidemic that kind of set off in the, I'd say, late 90s, early 2000s.
Where's Purdue based? I know they're a U.S. company, but where in the U.S.?
I think they mention it in the show. And
are they like a Midwest company, or they're like a California, East Coast? What?
I don't know why I want to say North Carolina.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that makes
but
sense.
It could be
Research Triangle.
Yeah, don't hold me to that, but it's they talk about it on the Eastern District when they're talking about the lawyers and the Attorney General. They're talking about the Eastern District, so it'll be in the East Coast somewhere. What they've done is really interesting. They've kind of taken a dual viewpoint. One is about the viewpoint of the guy who created it, right? The Sacklers, Dr. Richard Sackler. And the second story point is from, let's say, a ground level view of one of the doctors who was involved, who is Michael Keaton's character, Dr. Phoenix.
Oh, Michael Keaton's in it?
He's in it as well.
No way, really?
Yeah. You get to see the high level effect of what this guy wants to achieve with Dr. Sackler and the medicine. Yeah. And you also see the on ground effects. And of course, you have Will Poulter, who plays one of the salesmen who's actually pushing OxyContin to all the doctors. So it's really interesting that way. And the show jumps from what is the past when the drug is first being formulated and created to the quote unquote present, which is when the drug is hitting the streets, to, let's say, the super present, which is about when the effects are being seen and people are starting to think about taking them to court. So this is really interesting because there's the medical aspect to the story. There's the legal aspect to the story. It's really compelling to watch, especially if you don't know the story behind the opioid epidemic and the OxyContin crisis. If you like courtroom drama style shows that aren't necessarily in the courtroom, so you're not sitting there and watching a trial.
Oh, yeah. I'm in.
This is, the research elements. This is the lawyers actually digging in and trying to figure out who at the FDA was responsible for this, and all of the investigative work that takes place before it hits the court. All of that kind of happens. It's awesome. It's really well done. I like that kind of story. I love that because it's a true story. It's obviously slightly dramatized. So I don't know how much of it is genuine or not genuine, but in the same sense, that the overall story is true. And then, of course, it does the classic awesome thing, which is at the end of the final episode, you get to see real news clips and real, the results of what's actually happened.
Where are they now?
Exactly. So it's really good. I highly recommend it if you like this. This is my first must subscribe for 2023.
Of 2023.
Yeah.
Wow.
Even though the show came out last year, this was really good, or maybe even 2021. I can't remember.
Congratulations to Pete, the first must subscribe of 2023. Dopesick. That's great.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good. So I hesitate to call this a medical or an investigative drama or genre. Think of this as a biopic. If you like biopics, this is the one for you. It's excellent. I liked it. I really enjoyed it. And I expect that if you like true to life stories, you're going to like it as well.
Did you watch Theranos? I don't think it was called Theranos.
No, The Dropout. Yes.
The Dropout.
Yes, with Amanda Seyfried playing Elizabeth
Oh,
Holmes.
yeah. Did you watch that?
We did. That was one of our streamer skip assignments last year.
I love that. I can't remember. Were you on board with that as well?
I was, very much so.
Okay. So is this similar to that then in terms of the style?
It kind of is. So the Theranos case was slightly different because, again, it was really only focused on Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah.
Whereas this takes it up a notch because it focuses not just on Dr. Sackler, who created the medicine.
Yeah.
But also on Dr. Phoenix, who kind of was the poster child of what goes wrong with this medicine, because he was a doctor who was prescribing it, and then he himself gets hooked on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I don't know if this is true to life or not, but he plays that superbly.
It's one season, or how many seasons is it?
It's just the one season, 8 episodes, one and done. It's a relatively easy / quick watch. You could probably binge it over 3 days, 2 days.
I am in.
Yeah,
I am all the way in.
I expect that this is, because I know you saw and I think you also saw the WeWork one, right?
Yeah, We Crashed.
And if
Apple
I remember
TV+.
correctly, you didn't mind that either. That was pretty decent as well.
I love a good biopic as well.
Yeah.
You know, like even when you talk about something a little bit more dramatized, like The Big Short. Remember that with Steve Carell and all the folks. I love these true life stories.
Yeah.
And I like them to be as realistic and maintain the original storyline as much as possible. But I'm a sucker for these. I love them so much. I could almost watch any of them. You know, I don't know if I ever saw Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room, but I remember I read the book and I was captivated by that. So I really love these types of things.
For people who don't like documentaries, this is perfect because it's like a dramatic version of a documentary. Yeah. It's great. It's really good because I like documentaries, but I do find that some of them can be very dry and some of them can also be like too much of an info dump and you're just sitting there getting lectured at. Whereas this is kind of, you get to go with the story in a much more natural movie-like experience. And so it's much easier to get.
A documentary, I feel, is not necessarily objective, right? It seems that the documentarian, depending upon their position, may have a documentary and they may say, hey, let's take an objective look at this, both sides. Or they may say, let's talk about why this company or this event, you know, was totally unfair and so on and so forth, right?
Michael Moore most famously, right?
Yes. You're kind of at the whim of the documentarian. These biopics, I think, are intended to be a little bit more neutral, factually objective, but the way that the characters are played makes you either like them or not like them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think the We Crashed one was exactly the perfect example of that, right? You've nailed it. The problem I have with documentaries is that it's very hard to be objective because ultimately the documentarian will have their own biases. Yeah. So Michael Moore versus the radical right or the so-called radical right.
Yeah.
Or Dinesh D'Souza versus the so-called radical left.
Yeah.
The problem is that if you're a centrist, it's hard to believe anything anyone is saying because you don't know how much of it this is exaggerated for effect.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also based on the people that are interviewed are specifically chosen because they have something, I don't want to say they have something inflammatory to say, but they have something,
they push the narrative.
They have something colorful to say, right?
Yeah. I can give you examples, right? Like Dinesh D'Souza has interviewed some random people who are not indicative of the so-called democratic side of politics in the US.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, someone like Michael Moore, when he went to Charlton Heston's house after the NRA thing, and he lays that rose on his doorstep as a tribute, it's so over the top where you're just like, it takes away the credibility of the so-called documentary.
Is Michael Moore making documentaries anymore?
I don't know, but like after I saw that NRA one, the anti-gun one,
Yeah.
I thought it was doing the movement a disservice by being so blatantly on the other side. If you're going to do a documentary, for me, my opinion is you should try to present it as objectively as possible and let the viewer decide what side of the issue they fall on.
So I have to say, Michael Moore is talented when he picks an issue that is everyone agrees is problematic. For example, I've seen one where he attacked kind of like the education system in the US.
Okay.
And like the school lunch system in the US. And that's something that's there's no one pro or anti that.
Yeah, that's
right?
a bipartisan issue, right?
Yeah, he was just presenting it and saying, hey, we're a really big country. Like, why can't we have better education? Let's look at how they do it in other countries. Why is our school lunch program so miserable? It's not because we're not spending enough on food. There's something being lost along the way, that this is what we're feeding children when we believe that nutrition is kind of the building block of learning and attentiveness and stuff. That's his really good work. But I agree, once he starts to pick a side and he's just like, this movie's all going to be about pushing my viewpoint, whether that viewpoint's right or wrong. Usually think it's wrong, but yeah, like that's when he kind of goes off the rails into like Crazyville. And
and generally speaking, that is more to have a very biased view is much more difficult in a biopic, or in a We Crashed, or in The Dropout, or in this case Dopesick. It's much more difficult.
What about The Social Network? Remember The Social Network?
Or The Social Network, exactly.
Whoa.
Exactly. It's much
so
more
damaging. That was so damaging.
So damaging, but at the same time, like none of it was not factual. Let's put it that way, right? It wasn't alternative facts. It was, look, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And if you like Zuckerberg after this, that's fine. Yeah. If you don't like Zuckerberg after this, that's fine. But this is what happened.
The power of Jesse Eisenberg, right? The power of Justin Timberlake, right?
The world is more complicated. It's not black and white. There's loads of shades of gray. That's why I appreciate these kinds of TV series.
All right. So that is Dopesick on Hulu.
In my opinion, a must subscribe.
I'm in. Okay. Turning to my assignment this week, I had a series and it is appearing on, don't know.
You want to start the show?
It's on Showtime.
That's right.
It's Your Honor with Bryan Cranston, who we obviously love for a long, long time. This is set in New Orleans, and Bryan Cranston is a single father. His wife has passed away. He's raising a high school aged son. Cranston plays a character named Michael, and Michael is a judge, not like a federal judge. He's kind of like a more local judge where he's dealing with kind of like different street crime and drug dealing and theft and stuff like this. So the movie starts, of course, where he is still a little bit single and lonely from, his wife's passing. Obviously a very dedicated father to his son, who's, kind of the typical sleep in late, kind of not a bad kid, but, just a kid kind of doing his own thing. And he is a very righteous, virtuous judge, which means that he wants the truth. He sees, kind of the good in people. He believes people should have second chances. He doesn't see color or race in his decisions. He is very a stickler for the prosecutor or the police if they're trying to bend the rules. He's not the guy who's trying to just lock people up. He's really trying to be the administrator of justice, right? So we show him as this very virtuous judge who's always upholding the law, and this is right and this is wrong, and it doesn't matter how it's applied, right?
Okay.
So his son, for a lot of complicated reasons, is driving around one day in his secondhand Volvo, as all Judge's kids have, right? And he's fiddling with the radio, or he drops his phone on the floor, and he looks down and he smashes into a motorcycle. The motorcycle rider goes flying, and of course, it's an abandoned intersection. It's daytime, by the way. No one's around, no witnesses. Kind of disbelievable, but any case, kid gets out of the car, goes to see if the guy's all right, and the guy is totally messed up, kind of spitting up blood. The kid gets super freaked out and just flees the scene.
Okay.
Right? Bad. Judge gets home. Hey, son, how was your day? Bloody, bloody, blah. Finds out that the kid got into an accident. He's like, it's okay. You know, you were just nervous. You shouldn't have fled the scene. Let's go report it. Yeah. And he's like, let's do the right thing. You've got to take responsibility. I'm sure everything will be okay. And the son kind of minimizes, you know, the whole thing, right? Like, hey, I hit a guy, I left, I freaked out. Doesn't really say like, I left him for dead on the side of the road all by himself, right? So Cranston and his son kind of get to the police station. And as they are going in, as luck would have it, he sees kind of coming out a local, let's say, crime boss, and overhears or kind of deduces that the crime boss, his son, has died that day in a motorcycle accident, and the crime boss is out for street justice against whoever did this to his son, right? Cranston, who ordinarily is the straight shooter, you got to do what's right, does a 180 with his son, says, nope, we're not going to report this. Come with me. We got to think this over. And basically says, I know that guy. That guy's super dangerous. If you say that you are the driver, even if you didn't do anything wrong and you are not at fault, like that guy's going to come like murder you, and he's going to murder me, and he's going to murder like everyone around us. Like that's not the guy to be trifled with. I thought this was just an innocent, you knocked a guy off his motorcycle and he had a few broken bones and we'd, you know, take whatever punishment you had coming. This is different. You're not only going to face like possibly jail time forever, you're also probably going to be, you know, shivved while you're in jail, right? So Cranston, obviously the whole show goes now is set where Cranston has to go against all his moral and ethical positions, right? I mean, he's going against everything that he holds close to him. And he's now kind of playing both sides to both, you know, work his connections with the police to kind of see if there's any leads. And at the same time, you know, protect his son. And of course, as all 16 or 18-year-olds do when they're at the crime scene, they make a lot of stupid mistakes, leaving some evidence behind. The car, of course, has physical evidence on it. And it just kind of shows very similar to what's happened in Breaking Bad, by the way, now that I think about it, right? Where Cranston spends episodes trying to destroy evidence or get out of, you know, like situations, right? So it can't be traced back to him. He's doing something very similar here. I watched 3 episodes. I kind of see where it's going. Apparently there's 2 seasons of this so far. So I imagine it takes a lot of different twists and turns that I don't even see coming. So my rating is it's a solid mooch. I'm a little bit tempted to give it a must subscribe. And I think just in terms of the quality of the cast and the acting, it probably does reach that level. But to me, I have to say, even though I enjoyed watching Cranston, it's not really a mystery. You know, like I kind of know what happened, and now they're going to spend 1 or 2 seasons trying to get out of it. And I'm sure there's going to be like a lot of shenanigans and hijinks and twists and turns and how they try to destroy evidence or come up with a backstory or justify where they were or alibis and things like this. But I guess like after the first 2 episodes, I already know what happens, right? Or I know the event. It's not a mystery. There's no unraveling it or, you know, surprise in store. So I was able to kind of turn it off after 3 episodes. I enjoyed it. It definitely kept my attention. but I wasn't like dedicated to staying up all night and watching what happened next, because I'm assuming each episode is just going to be a new piece of kind of physical evidence has been found, or some new witness has emerged, and Cranston's going to use his kind of political capital to get rid of it, or he's going to come up with some elaborate kind of backstory for him and his son to explain it away. And I just thought, like, I've kind of better things to do, but that's not to take away from the show, or especially the cast. It's a very good drama, but it's also a very deep drama. There's no humor in this at all. It's entirely based on dialogue, a little bit of action, and the dramatic effect in terms of, are they going to uncover this? Or, oh no, there was this fingerprint, or oh no, he did leave this at the scene, or oh no, what about his phone, and on and on and on. Okay. So that is Your Honor on Showtime.
So that's like a mooch. When I heard the premise, I immediately thought back to Breaking Bad, because it was about a good guy who has to do something bad because of the circumstances, not because he's inherently a bad guy. So the question is, and now that I've heard your review, I will watch it. The question for me will be, does he continue, quote unquote, Breaking Bad because now he's got a taste for it?
That's a good question. I mean, since there's a second season, it makes sense. I mean, it's hard to do 2 seasons of just covering up cell phone calls, fingerprints, and broken headlight with blood on it, right?
Yeah.
It seems like that does not have 2 episodes into it. It seems like somehow, I'm just guessing here, so not to give away any spoilers, he eventually gets found out by the mob boss, but the mob boss says, look, I'll consider it even if you get my guy out of jail early, right?
Some on kind parole, of quid pro quo kind of thing.
Yeah. So I imagine that's kind of how it goes. And you're right. The hard part about this is, or maybe the deep part about this is, it does call into question really tough life choices. That's I think one of the reasons that these shows are compelling, is that here's this guy, Michael, who's lost his wife. He's doing the best that he can by all measures, right? He's really a good human being, a good professional by all measures. His son's gotten himself into a pickle. And as a father, what do you do, right? I mean, who among us, well, not among you and me because we don't have kids, but who among us
that we know
of wouldn't probably do the same thing for their kid, right?
Yeah.
You would not just say, well, that is unfortunate that you accidentally killed a mob boss's son. Best of luck in prison. I shall visit you weekly until you get shivved in the back. You would definitely do probably whatever you need to do in the name of protecting or saving your son, right? And maybe those aren't good things, and maybe they're not legal things, but I guess in the great scheme of morality, they're justified because it's in order to help your son or your offspring, right?
Yeah.
So I assume that's kind of the slippery slope that we're going to go down. I mean, over the course of 20 episodes, is that it started off as just kind of like a white lie, asking police for like a little bit more information, and it's going to probably go into pretty soon he's letting people out on parole, or he's giving confidential information to the mob boss, and he's just in like, you're in for a penny, you're in for the pound, right?
Yeah.
So definitely very, very quality show. If it's the type of show that you want, you will absolutely love it. If you're not really into this type of drama with relatively not low stakes in terms of human life, but low stakes in terms of you're not saving the world from aliens or anything like this, it's probably not for you. But I can imagine this is a solid show, and it's a great role for Bryan Cranston, a role we've seen him in before, but still a very good role for him.
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to seeing it then, in that case.
Yeah, let me know what you think. I'm going to watch Dopesick as well. So this week I can, even though we only had one must subscribe, I think we had a very good roster this week, right?
Excellent. It was really good. And I mean, again, based on what you've said, it looks like it has the legs for, multiple seasons, which is for me always a plus.
I know you don't watch anything, although Dopesick you liked, but yeah, generally you do not touch anything that's not 2 seasons.
Generally, yeah. Look, I make exceptions to miniseries because typically speaking, miniseries have a very tight, small objective.
Yeah.
And, if it's a good story, it's a good story. What I don't like is to see a TV series that has the potential for long seasons and then it gets cut off after the first season and then you're left in limbo, right? And we saw that with Night Sky.
Night Sky. Oh,
Yep,
yeah.
that's exactly right.
Is there really not going to be a second season of that?
It got canceled.
Oh.
And that leaves such a bad taste in your mouth, right? Because it had not a cliffhanger.
That second season was all set up to be super cool, by the way.
Yeah, right. Where you're on this other planet, it's got a
Yeah.
city with humans in it. There's got to be
Yeah.
something more to it, and we never learned the fate of what happens next.
Yeah.
So,
Oh man,
that's the problem.
that is really disappointing because I thought that show was so good, and I love that neighbor, by the way. I love that neighbor.
Yeah. So, all of those things, we'll never know the answer.
Yeah, well, let's bring that back. When we bring back Battlestar Galactica, let's bring this one back as well.
I'd love it. And by the way, if this is one of those things that could possibly be based off of a book, if you guys know this or if you know of
Oh,
the story,
is there a book?
I have no idea, but it seems like it could be, right?
Yeah.
Let us know. Or if you know the story or if you know anything, reach out to us. Let us know. Tag us at Films and Stuff Podcast on Instagram, or you can drop us a line on Twitter at F&S Podcast. Email us aloha at filmsandstuffpodcast.com, or leave a comment below this video.
We love comments. So yeah, we had a great episode today. We had a great week of streamer skip picks. Pete, what do we have for next week? The virtual dice have been cast, right?
They have indeed. For next week, I'm intrigued for what you've got because this is another first for us.
Tell me.
Next week, you've got Human Playground.
What?
It is a documentary series. It's not a normal show. On Netflix.
Human Playground?
The reason I picked it for you is 2 reasons. One, it's hosted by Idris Elba.
I'm in.
And 2, it's about people who excel in sports, and it's some kind of documentary to do with people in sports or something like that. That was the very brief synopsis I read when I was making your list. So I thought this would be right up your alley.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Human Playground on Netflix. All right.
Yeah. And I've got on Apple TV Plus a show called Liaison.
Ooh, spy thriller.
Never heard of it, but I'm in. If you say it was a spy thriller, I'm in.
Yeah, it's a spy thriller on Apple TV Plus, and I've been holding off watching it because I know it's on your list, but I'm deeply invested in having you tell me whether this is worth watching or not.
Done and done. This time next week, you're going to know if that's what you're going to be binging next weekend.
Not a traditional Apple type show, right? Apple's usually a little bit smaller in terms of their themes, right?
Is this like an international spy thriller?
I think so.
Okay. So, because Slow Horses is their other spy espionage story, but you're right. It's very, I don't want to say
local,
small scale, but it is very UK centric and more specifically like London centric, really.
Yeah. When you look at everything on Apple TV Plus, and they're quite good at this, right? They're quite good at having like shrinking.
Yeah. Which I'm loving, by the way.
What was the other one with the dudes in this kind of weird office?
Severance, which was
Severance.
Awesome. Yeah.
Severance. They had Grey Wolf or whatever it was with Tom Hanks had kind of 2 or 3 shows in a row. Like they were all very good at being clever in terms of disguising their plots but making them very local within kind of like bigger issues, And those are very clever, I think, also for like budgetary purposes, unlike Netflix, which blows their wad on these big.
That's true, actually. I imagine that if you looked at all of the shows that Apple TV has put out, and I'm going to discount the cost of actors because actors vary in salary, but shows themselves, production budgets, I imagine, are relatively low for the quality that they're putting out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of one of the hallmarks of what Apple's done is that they've said, look, like, we're not HBO. I mean, to be honest, they could be. They're probably bigger than HBO, right? But they've said, look, we're not going to do these big, grand things like HBO or Amazon. We're going to put out really quality stuff. Blackbird's another example, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Blackbird was in
couple of jail cells and like a farm in the middle of Iowa. I say Iowa, but I mean in the middle of the boonies, basically.
Yeah. I mean, so I think Apple is very clever in terms of getting the most bang for their buck in terms of production value.
Yeah.
None of their shows have seemed small, but when you look at them kind of one by one, you see like they haven't really like blown an insane amount of money with, okay, now this is filmed in Istanbul. The scene is in Berlin. The scene is in here, right? Whereas Netflix is maybe not anymore, but I feel like for some big Netflix things, you know, they're all over the place.
They went all over the place for
Code Red, right? Yeah.
Red Notice. All of these kinds of movies. Yeah. You know, you're probably right. With the exception of their sci-fi shows, I'm not saying that For All Mankind is cheap, but it's not super over the top.
A lot of it's in an office. A lot of it's in an office.
Yeah. It's not super over the top. Yeah. I would say their big budget show is probably Foundation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
because Foundation that's got a lot of CGI. It's got a lot of visual effects. It's all over the place. So
yeah, it does.
Maybe Foundation.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think they've been relatively, let's say, fiscally minded.
I think For All Mankind, which, man, I can't wait until we see another episode. I think there were only a few scenes that we saw that kind of had like some CGI-ish stuff. Like, remember they did kind of like a spacewalk. Remember when the cosmonaut got crushed between the two shuttles, the Russian shuttle?
Yeah.
Like that was kind of CGI-y. But they do most of their work inside the spacecraft with just kind of like some stars kind of outside the window, and they're pretty good, I think, at keeping those budgets in check. Which is I mean, unique for a company, for Apple, which has the resources. They've really exercised some discipline, but they haven't sacrificed quality. You can make good stuff without sacrificing the quality, you know? Blackbird's a great example. Yeah.
This is, I think, also what Netflix did when it first started. And I think Netflix just kind of lost sight of that when everybody else got into the game. And then they started panicking and saying, all right, well, we've got this war chest. Let's just blow it out on all these big budget movies and titles. We want to win Oscars. We want to be the platform. Yeah.
They don't have the viewership of Apple, and they don't have the catalog of Apple. When you go to Apple, you can easily be like, I've seen these 5 things, right?
Yeah.
There's times when you go to Apple, there's nothing new, right?
Yeah.
Like the Tetris movie is coming out, like they'll say like 2 weeks in advance, something new coming in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Whereas Netflix, daily,
they just drop them.
They've always got something coming out.
Yeah.
The problem with Netflix is the vast majority of it is kind of rubbish, you know?
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. I think this is, you know, a sniper versus a shotgun. It's they're going quantity over quality, whereas I think Apple is going much more quality. And you know, it's working for them. I don't know their subscriber numbers off the top of my head now, and they're clearly the smaller platform, but at least in terms of quality, they're consistent.
Where's Amazon in all this? Because I found that Amazon is not really dropping anything new. They're all over the place. All that goodwill that they built up with Wheel of Time and Rings of Power, what are all those subscribers supposed to do now?
So Amazon is making a big content push, but their content push is very hit or miss. So, you know, they just acquired the rights to make a Tomb Raider either movie or TV series, but they took the franchise rights from the Embracer Group. They bought the franchise rights for some ridiculous number to buy the franchise rights for that. They spent $13 billion with the NFL Network to put Thursday night games on their platform.
For how many years is that?
15 seasons, I think. 13 seasons, something like that. It was almost $1 billion a year is what I remember. Or 12 seasons, something like that.
And maybe in year 10 that starts to look good, but right now for a week.
That is excessive. Yeah. I love the NFL as much as the next man. Maybe not as much as you, but still, like that is a lot for a platform that really has mass market appeal only in North America.
And you know what? Those Thursday night games, if it's a Sunday night game or a Monday night game, but Thursday night is the toughest night to get people to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, Thursday is that day where everyone is just rushing like mad to get everything done that they need to do before the weekend, you know? If there's a night that you work late in the office, it's Thursday night, you know? If there's a night that you've got to go, your kids have a school event, it's not a Friday, it's a Thursday, you know? So I feel like Thursdays are just a hard ratings day. You know, you've got work the next week. No one's really like ready to go out to a bar on a Thursday night, unless you're a college kid, and like watch a game that's going to end at like 10 or 11 p.m. You know, like you're like, hey, I've got plenty. I've got college football coming on, you know, Saturday. I've got NFL coming on Sunday. There's a Monday night game. Like if I've got to skip one game,
it's probably going to be Thursday. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Thursday games are never good.
Especially if you're on the West Coast, that game started and you don't even have time to watch it, right?
Yeah, that's miserable.
And if you're on the East Coast, you're like, man, like I'm not staying up until 11 o'clock. Like I've got to get up. I've got a big day of work tomorrow. I've got to get everything done before the weekend, you know, like I think that's a tough night to have games. And if you're paying that as your premium, I don't like it.
And then, of course, there was the $1 billion a season debacle of Rings of Power.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think this is true, but already there were rumors that they wanted to reboot it already after season 1. This is the problem, is that you have a company which has limited experience in creating content. They're good at distributing content.
Yeah.
Amazon works on any device that you've got. It'll work wonders on it. You can buy and watch movies on any platform available.
Yeah.
And I think their mistake was, instead of just becoming a distribution channel, they were like, no, we want to create content too. We have more money than any other platform, which of course they do, except for maybe Apple. And so their goal is to just buy their way out of this problem. But content isn't a commodity. It's an art, and you can't buy your way out of it.
Yeah. If you're going to buy your way out of it, like at least buy good stuff. I mean, you've seen HBO makes really good decisions on their content. I mean, it's not a problem where there's no solution. It's just a problem where you can't, that money alone doesn't solve it. You need to think, you need to be a little bit patient. You need to have an eye for talent, and you need to have kind of a strategy, you know?
Yeah.
HBO is such a high batting average. Wheel of Time was good.
Yeah, Wheel of Time wasn't bad. It was a relatively good start for a new fantasy franchise.
So make another season. This is the problem, is that how am I supposed to be interested in this if there's going to be a 2-year lag between season 1 and season 2?
I totally agree. You know what it is it's probably that Jeff Bezos, just kind of helicopter parenting, says, I have $50 billion to invest into content creation. You guys go to town and show me that, you know, you've spent this $50 billion. So let's just spend it on anything and everything.
I want to see the Expanse origins.
Or continue it, right? Because the Expanse finished, but they finished. There's more to the books, but they didn't want to do that.
I would be down for Expanse. And please, Bezos, be listening. Battlestar Galactica or Buck Rogers, right? There's stuff out there that can be made or remade. How much is a Buck Rogers franchise? I'm making up this number. $25 million.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I was thinking exactly the same. It's like, these are all franchises that you could get started for relatively cheap, right?
Yeah.
And if you want an example of that, look at what Netflix did with Lost in Space. That was exactly the right thing to do. They modernized it. They made it fun to watch. Yeah. I remember the original Lost in Space from TV from back in the whatever days it was.
Yep.
I remember that relatively mediocre to pretty bad movie they did with Matt LeBlanc and Heather Graham.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Matt LeBlanc and Heather Graham. That's so funny.
And I thought this TV series was excellent. And it is not $100 million show. but they made it look like it, and it was good. I'm telling you, Amazon, hire us. We'll come up with a list of content for you.
Can we do that? Let's have a I mean, we've done this before. We've talked about like what things we want to see rebooted, but I think I would like to see Buck Rogers, right? Milo, our guest from 2 weeks ago, suggested this, Milo Dennison.
And really a good call, like a very good call, but well said.
And, I mean, I thought that Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, was really fracking miserable. Yeah,
okay.
I would really like to see that remade, but remade better. Because the Battlestar Galactica I remember as a kid was quite good. The reboot was really kind of miserable. Yeah. So I think they should do that again. And there's some other things that I'd like to see. Like I said, I'd like to see more of The Expanse. Either continue the story or do an origins, and let's see how Mars got populated, how they got militarized and things like that. You know?
Yeah. And it gives you an opportunity to go out of source material. So if you don't want to do that, you're buying the franchise rights for the universe, but you're not buying the franchise rights for specific characters. It becomes a much cheaper proposition.
Yeah. The hard choices we have in this world, Pete. Okay. So that is Stream or Skip. Twitter us, DM us on Instagram, message us, or old-fashioned email. We'll look forward to your comments. Any ideas for what you would like us to review in the future?
Let us know. We're always interested in adding more to our list.
Indeed. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining Films and Stuff. This was Stream or Skip. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.